Speaking of the Premier League, obviously the big story over the last 48 hours is the proposals of Project Big Picture. You can just see the back page of the newspapers here, revolting, civil war, football at war, the Times going with fury at the Big Six power grab. And in case you've missed this, let's just fill you in what kind of this is all about. Daily Telegraph breaking this story. The Premier League will be reduced to 18 teams. There'll be a playoff then between the 3rd, 4th and 5th place championship side with a 16th place team in the Premier League. Away with the League Cup, away with the Community Shield, and the Premier League will give 25% of its annual revenue to EFL clubs. Well, let's welcome, shall we, Ian Darke and Mark Ogden into the show to discuss this in a little bit more detail. Mark, I want to start with you. We've heard a lot of negative rhetoric around this since the story broke. What is the positives? What are they trying to sell you on here?
It's a good question because, like you say, that it's been wholly negative. I've not heard anybody come out and say this is a good idea, apart from Rick Parry, whose idea it was. You know, he sold it to Liverpool and Man United and other big clubs. But ultimately, the winners in this will be the richest clubs in England. They will have the opportunity to pull further and further away. Yes, you know, there's a offer of £250 million straight away for the EFL, £100 million for the FA, and the idea is to save these clubs from extinction because a lot of the clubs are in real trouble now. But there are strings attached, and the strings attached would be that the big clubs will get a greater say and a greater slice of the action going forward, which means that they'll just pull further and further away. So the likes of Leeds and Aston Villa and Newcastle, these historic big clubs that seem to be on a bounce back right now, will never be able to get anywhere close because they're pulling up the drawbridge. The big clubs are pulling up the drawbridge and taking all the money with them.
Ian, you've made no secret, very close to Portsmouth. This would help them, wouldn't it, in the short term?
Well, I think it is a carve up by the Big Six. There's a lot of glossy wrapping here, and you know it seems on the surface like an easy solution to the current problems caused by COVID for the teams in the lower divisions. And yes, that money would be welcome. But one of the proposals is to scrap the League Cup. Well, that makes a fair bit of money for teams further down the pyramid. So there's one controversial element. For a start, I mean, this is not going to happen. This would be like turkeys voting for Christmas for a lot of the teams away from the Big Six. So they're not going to vote for it. I don't see it going through unless it is just a starting point for negotiation, and there is a lot of modification that goes on. But there'd be no more Blackburn Rovers, no more Leicester City surprise stories if this happened, because it would be the elite ring fencing itself.
So what's the point, Mark? If they knew that no one's going to vote for it, if the turkeys aren't going to vote for Christmas, why even make this public?
Well, I guess you start with a radical plan, and in the end you come to some sort of agreement which is a watered down version. So I guess that it's a starting point, and it's a radical starting point, and it won't get passed through. It is very much like the idea of a 39th game, which is probably, I think, 10, 12 years ago now. That never got off the ground either. I think there is a solution needs to be made. The lower league clubs don't get enough money out of the big clubs at the moment. They're really struggling. I think the percentage shift from what it used to be prior to the Premier League is unrecognisable now. And Ian made the point about the League Cup. You know, this time last year, I think Rochdale played Manchester United at Old Trafford, and I was speaking to their chairman. They're a League One club. And he said that just by playing Manchester United at Old Trafford and getting a game on TV and the crowd that came with it, they earned £493,000 from one game. Now, that was enough to keep them in business for 3 months in terms of paying the wages, paying the staff. That sort of money is huge. So I don't understand why Rick Parry, the chairman of the EFL, is actually advocating a plan which suggests getting rid of the League Cup, because that is a real meal ticket for a lot of these clubs. So it doesn't stack up. But ultimately, football in England does need to find a way to balance the books a little bit more. It'll never be equal. The big clubs will always claim a greater share, but I imagine that what will happen is there'll be talks and there'll be some sort of compromise down the line. This may also be a kind of a power play with the government as well, because it obviously there's a real bone of contention right now about fans in games. You know, we've seen in Europe that lots of European countries are letting fans in. In England, that's still been blocked, and I think there's a sense of, right, well, if you're not going to help us out, the government, we'll do something that's really going to create headlines and create a fuss. So it may be a power play, but I might be giving them too much credit for that. But I do think there's a lot of behind-the-scenes politics at play, and obviously this will never get off the ground in its current form.
What's the solution overall? We're seeing a lot of the teams in the lower leagues face bankruptcy, face administration, Ian, because of what we've seen over the last few months with regards to COVID. What is the solution that you would put forward?
Well, I think there's got to be a bailout from the Premier League. A sensible figure has got to be agreed, because if you look at the recent England team, a lot of those players started playing non-league football or were loaned to non-league clubs. So the pyramid is really important, I think, for English football in its present state. So I think the government have got to help. They've given a lot of money to the arts. I think now they've got to help these communities, because football teams are huge in those communities. In places like Rochdale, we've seen Bury go out of business. We've seen Macclesfield go out of business. Those football clubs have got to be kept going. So a combination of money from the Premier League. I mean, there's huge amounts of money being made by the game. So it's wrong, really, particularly in a situation like this, that any clubs are going out of business because of what is happening with COVID. And I think Mark's right about they're trying to make a point to the government here, because they want at least 20% crowds back in, and there's no reason really why that can't happen away from the hotspot cities.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.